Welcome, everybody, to a new edition of Inside Boxing Daily. I'm your host for tonight, Jeremiah Preisser, and I want to welcome you in, as always. And as always, we're brought to you by betnow.eu. Click on the banner, use Truth50 as your code. You get a little extra betting money for your boxing. We're also brought to you by Seat Giant. You can get tickets for the Golovkin-Derevyanchenko fight. We get a little... we'll get a little back from that too. Again, click on that banner on the right-hand side of the website. We're also brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos, the former amateur standout. Good guy too, doing a lot for boxers. If you want, you can go over there and donate, help fighters out, because, as I've elaborated on a number of times, they do not have a 401k plan, so they need anything they can get. With that... I just wanted to let everybody know that, Inside Boxing has been delayed. We're in a restructuring process because Mike is so damn busy right now. I mean, the guy is doing a lot of shows. He's doing CFL, NFL, football, college and professional. The guy, will do 5-6 shows a day. He's an animal. And, because of that, I got to take over the reins in terms of boxing. So hopefully I can get some new stuff up next week. I'm trying to get all the technical stuff down. And then I'm hoping to get some, some new shows on the way to increase your enjoyment. Because, it seems like everybody's got a damn boxing show anymore. And we do host a number of them ourselves. We've got, Ringside Boxing Show on Sundays. They've always got great guests. They actually had Teofimo Lopez Sr. on. They had Bobby Chiz the week before. All sorts of interesting people. And then, of course, we got, Michael Montero stuff on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've also got Chris Carlson's Rope-A-Dope Radio. We got a new Irish boxing podcast, an Inswell Boxing podcast. I talked about, former medalist Darren Sutherland last time out. We've also got Beyond the Ropes, though they haven't sent me anything in a little while. I think they might be on vacation. We got something for just about every day except Saturday. We also have Chris Henderson's stuff, The Counterpunch, which is new as well, and that should be up Thursdays or Fridays. That just started. So go and check that out. That did really good numbers last week. Hopefully this show does pretty good numbers. I know I'm doing a solo job here, and it's not as exciting, not as much give and take, but bear with me. And all I really want to talk about is the prospect of ducking. And it's a word that saturates a lot of conversation on social media. This guy's ducking this guy's ducking him, he's ducking her, he's ducking his manager, he's ducking into a back alley whenever he sees this guy walking down the sidewalk. It's just, it plays so much in a sport with so many hard asses that it just, something for me just doesn't compute. And it's not as if to say there isn't a level of avoidance. There's always been degrees of avoidance in this sport, no doubt about it. Whether it's money, whether it's style, whether it's management, whether it's promotional, it all exists. A lot of it's unfortunate because we miss a ton of great fights because of this shit. And I hate it. I really do. But, we can all only work within the system that we're given. And hopefully we can demand enough change to where the system, becomes something we could admire, or at least closer to we could admire. But as of now, you have level avoidance. And I prefer the term avoidance over ducking, because ducking to me seems to imply that there's like a fear involved with it. And that just... Anybody who knows boxers, at the amateur level, I've certainly seen some guys who are afraid of others. A lot of guys who don't stay in shape. Some of them are just afraid to get in the ring because they're not capable of, maximizing their potential. But when it comes to high-level athletes, the creme de la creme of these divisions, the Usyks, the Golovkins, the Alvarezes, the Lomachenkos, the Kovalevs and so many others, those guys don't strike me as people who are innately fearful of other fighters. They've been doing it so long that it just, again, it doesn't really seem to compute. I'm not good at math, but 2 and 2 doesn't seem to add up right now. And that's what you seem to get with a lot of these people is that guys like Alvarez, guys like Golovkin, they're ducking. Apparently, they're swerving all sorts of people, it seems. But sorry, I had to kick an animal here. Just kidding. But it's you would just think at the amount of ducking that these guys are apparently doing. I mean, they're just holding on to their titles like it's a fucking like it's a raft in the Titanic just sunk. It just doesn't seem to make fucking sense to me. And again, it's not to say that there is an avoidance, but the thing about it is we do not gauge the levels of avoidance the same way. We just don't, and a lot of people don't acknowledge it. But take, for instance, Adrian Broner, when he was at 135. The only person he needed to defeat at 135, if I'm not mistaken, was Miguel Vazquez to become the champion at 135. And nobody gave a shit that he jumped up to 147 to fight Paulie Malignaggi, who was not a good styles matchup either, but certainly wasn't the boring spoiler that Miguel Vazquez was. Nobody except me and maybe a few others that I can't recall gave him much flack for that. We understood that fight just wasn't going to be entertaining. It wasn't going to maximize his wallet, and nobody really cared. You see it all the time, whether it's political, again, promotional. I mean, if an Al Heyman guy and Top Rank guy don't get together, I mean, people who are involved in the industry, they seem to understand. A lot of the fans don't, and you can't be mad at all the fans. I mean, why would you? I mean, anybody who comes to boxing and they're like, well, why the hell can't this guy fight this guy? Or, why isn't this guy fighting? Like, why aren't the best fighting the best? A lot of them come in with a working knowledge of other sports like NFL or NBA or, tennis or whatever it may be, where, the best regularly play the best, where you have, like in college football, professional football, where you have a playoff and you're going to get the number one and number two guys. Again, college football, I know. Anyways, you get what I'm going. You get where I'm going with this. But, like a professional football, you know that the best of the bunch are going to play each other at the end. And, the Super Bowl is going to be a semi-religious event where, millions and millions of people tune in, and have parties and whatnot. When they go to boxing, and then they got to sift through the web of politics, whether it's promotion or management or money or alphabet trinkets or whatever the hell it is, political ties. You can understand why some of these people are confused as to why things don't happen. But some of these people understand boxing politics, at least to a degree, and still play dumb. And I'm going to go to a conversation that I had about Kennedy Golovkin. And, I feel like I sound like a fanboy sometimes because I find myself defending him quite a bit. And I am a fan, no doubt about it. But there are things that certain people must understand because it's guys at the top of the mountain, right? A lot of these guys are at the top looking down. They've proven more than almost anybody else in their division. Other people are looking up at them wanting a shot. But apparently the people who have proven the most are the ones ducking the contenders, and it just doesn't add up. Yeah, again, sure, there's avoidance, right? Like, Saul Alvarez, for instance. He's the money man. Everybody wants a shot right now. Everybody and their grandmother is calling him out. But guess what? He's not fighting Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade is arguably the third best middleweight in the world right now. And you could say he's most worthy of the shot. I think you could reasonably say that. I don't think that personally, but you could reasonably say that. You could say, hey, Golovkin, he had 2 shots. He's 0-1-1. I know. Don't kill me here. Okay. It's not as if I thought Golovkin was 0-1-1, but unfortunately that's, what's jotted down on the record on BoxRec. But you could say, hey, Golovkin got 2 shots. He didn't get a victory. He's not likely to get a victory in a third fight, which I think most people would agree with. And, Daniel Jacobs is moving up. Charlo doesn't have a great resume, nor does Andrade.
So you could say that Demetrius Andrade is the most worthy contender to Alvarez's middleweight championship at the moment. But look at the landscape in terms of fandom, right? Most people are not chomping at the bit to get Canelo Alvarez versus Demetrius Andrade, and it's because stylistically he's just not that interesting. Is he a good fighter? Is he highly skilled? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, he hasn't beaten a top-level guy at middleweight, and I think that's unfortunate, but he's still worthy. But nobody's really pushing for that fight. If he was more fun, if he was an aggressor, Alvarez would get more shit for not fighting him. I think that's just plain and simple. So, and some of it's money too. I mean, it's not only styles, but it's money. I mean, Demetrius Andrade put a good number of butts in the seats when he was in his hometown of, Rhode Island. But we all know he's not a big sell. DAZN knows he's not a big sell. That's why they're not pushing for that either. They need subscribers, and Demetrius Andrade is just not going to do that. So is Alvarez ducking Demetrius Andrade? Is he ducking, Charlo, who is now the WBC titleist, full titleist, whatever the hell he is? It's all a bunch of bullshit. But is Alvarez now ducking, Charlo because Charlo is in an elevated position? No, he's not. I mean, again, it's all the belts and the politics and all that stuff. I think we've got to remove ourselves from that a little bit because it's just not indicative of reality. Yeah, belts signify something, and there are calls for mandatory positions and unifications and all this other shit, but we have to understand, and I know a lot of you do. Anybody who's listening to me talk here is probably well aware of some of this stuff. But those of you who aren't need to understand that these calls by, these sanctions by the alphabet soup organizations, they're not what you think they are. I mean, people will live and die by what some of these people say, this is an example I use with Golovkin because I found myself defending him the other day, but there was a WBC convention in Kiev, Ukraine, and in this convention, Golovkin, the WBC sanctioned Golovkin versus Charlo. Okay, and now you have a lot of people running around saying that Golovkin ducked Charlo because they were sanctioned to fight, but Golovkin avoided him. And of course, this ignores context completely because by the time Charlo became the interim titleist, which was April of 2018, I don't know how the hell you have an interim titleist when there's already a titleist anyways. There's no interim. It doesn't make any sense. This isn't a wartime period where fucking Tony Zale is off fighting World War II and, there won't be a champion for a few years. It's not the same thing. It doesn't make any sense. The title is meaningless. But what I'm saying is, you have people saying that Golovkin avoided Charlo, even though Charlo didn't become the quote-unquote mandatory until April of 2018. Well, Golovkin fought in May of 2018 against Martirosyan because Alvarez was using clenbuterol. Whether you believe that was accidental or not is irrelevant. The point is that usage pushed the fight back until September. And so what you had was a 6-month period between May and the Alvarez rematch, and you have people saying that Golovkin avoided his mandatory, and it's just absurd. I mean, Golovkin is not going to scrap an Alvarez rematch to fight his quote-unquote mandatory because the WBC is worried about it. They obviously weren't that worried about it. I mean, look, in retrospect, the WBC was obviously not that concerned about it because Alvarez ended up getting the belt anyways. And are they, even though they sanctioned Golovkin Charlo, are they now sanctioning Alvarez versus Charlo? Are all of a sudden they getting into that mode? They're not. So it just shows you how full of shit these alphabet companies are and how they do things politically. But to me, you've got to be daft to think that Golovkin is going to scrap the rematch. Nobody in their right mind is going to scrap an Alvarez rematch, especially when Alvarez holds most of the chips. He's really the one dictating the terms to you. So if he says we're fighting in September of 2018, you don't say, no, you know what, I'm going to fight Charlo and you can wait until May of 2019. It just doesn't work that way. And a lot of us already understand that. And then also playing in that context is you had people, when Golovkin fought Martirosyan, who was a backup, because of Alvarez, and he lost his IBF trinket. A lot of people are like, oh, well, he's ducking Sergey Derevyanchenko. I like the guy. I like Sergey. He's a good fighter. But you don't fight Daniel Jacobs and fight Alvarez twice and duck Derevyanchenko. It's clear now that Sergey is not the level of operator that Alvarez and Daniel Jacobs are. And now that Golovkin is fighting Derevyanchenko, you hear a lot of critics with the people who initially said that he was ducking him. And so it just, this is my point is again, it's not, these guys aren't standing up at the top of the mountain like, no, you're not going to get it. I'm fighting soft touches for the rest of my career. It's just, there's just a lot at play here. And the one thing about all that too, where, the WBC convention and how they sanctioned Golovkin versus Charlo, it's all goalpost moving, man. It's all it is when it comes to these fanboys. People who hate Golovkin or hate this guy or hate that guy. Lomachenko is one of those guys who gets it too. All of a sudden these guys are boogeyman. They just appear, they don't even beat contenders, but all of a sudden they're boogeyman to guys who have stellar resumes. But it's for instance, like that WBC convention that these people like to talk about where the WBC sanctioned the Golovkin-Charlo fight. None of them bring up the fact that Mikey Garcia was sanctioned to fight Luke Campbell. Keith Thurman was he was supposed to fight Sean Porter in a rematch. Anthony Durrell was supposed to fight Yildirim in a rematch. Jorge Linares was sanctioned to fight Adrian Broner. And Gary Russell Jr. was sanctioned to fight Leo Santa Cruz. Do any of these people bring up any of these points? No, it's only about Golovkin, and it's only about Charlo, and it's only to fit a narrative. And this is not all about Golovkin. It's not all about Alvarez. The point is that these guys are world-class athletes and they're fighters. They stick out from the general public because of their toughness, because of their dedication. I mean, I don't give a shit if you think Amir Khan is chinny or not, honestly. I mean, yeah, it's the truth, but when you think of toughness is not all in how your ability to take a punch. Some of it's your ability to give up or get up. Sorry. But some of it is also in your dedication to the sport and how well you can put the fucking hours in the gym. I mean, you don't think it's tough giving up sweets and so many of the delicacies that normal people enjoy for themselves because they don't have to worry about cutting 20 pounds in 12 weeks. That's toughness, man. I mean, try it. If the average person could do it, there'd be more fighters, but they don't. It's tough. It's tough eliminating all that stuff, saying, hey, no, I don't want a soda. Hey, I stick to the greens. I mean, look at Canelo Alvarez's diet leading up to the Floyd Mayweather fight, when he had to drop an extra 2 pounds. I mean, remember the 24/7s? I mean, the dude was eating, nothing but salad with no dressing and salmon. I think that's about all he was eating. And I remember distinctly him making a comment like, I'm sick of eating this. I mean, again, that's tough. It takes a lot of mental time. Will Smith has made this point as well, is that, there's a good video of him where he's talking about how fans will come up to him and they're like, oh, I want to be where you are, man. And he says, you got to get right mentally, before you can be where I am. You've got to learn, it's like a car, man. If you're putting the shitty gas in it all the time, it's not going to run as efficiently as if you're putting high octane in there. That's just all there is to it. But, we're sitting here stuffing our faces with, spicy Cheetos on a couch criticizing these guys. And don't get me wrong, being a fan doesn't mean you can't observe and elaborate and analyze. You have that right. You absolutely do. And I'm not of the opinion that you have to be a fighter or trainer, etc., to understand what the hell's going on. There are plenty of guys who made the transition to the game who've turned out to be good fighters or and whatnot. I mean, Joe Calzaghe's dad, for instance, didn't have any experience. I don't know if he was reading any books or whatnot, or how exactly he accumulated his knowledge. Maybe he just took to it like a duck takes to water. I mean, some people just gravitate towards it and they've got a natural inclination. But my point is that these guys are tough. They really are. I mean, draining yourself all the time. Some of these guys are only drinking water. They're barely eating anything at all in the lead up to the fight. I mean, and some of these guys have 10 pounds to kill, the day before the fight. I mean, look at Mikey Garcia. In that, what the hell did they call it? I think it was a Showtime thing where they were showing him before the, what was it? The Martinez fight where what was it? He fainted, or he damn near fainted, because he was draining himself so much. And tons of guys go through that, but you never hear the stories. Journeyman, contenders, fringe guys, all these guys going through the struggle. They're tough. Yeah, so that's just why I have a hard time with so many guys being called duckers. Yeah, there's some level of avoidance. I've already acknowledged that. We all know what happens. We all don't apply the same outrage. It's based on circumstance. But, to call, Gennady Golovkin a ducker, and say, oh, he only wants to fight the Steve Rolls of the world. After Derevyanchenko, 4 of the last 6 fights that he's had have been against top 5 guys, 2 against the other 2 best middleweights in the world. I mean, you could argue, and in fact, you could argue that Derevyanchenko is the next best middleweight in the world. You could argue that Derevyanchenko is number 3. I think that Transnational has him right behind Daniel Jacobs, and we all know Daniel Jacobs is moving up. He's already scheduled to fight Julio Cesar Chavez at 168. So, how at 34 plus years of age do 4 of your last 6 fights, come against, just pretty much the best the division has to offer. And then people, use their Twitter fingers and say, oh, this guy's a duck, right? Get on Facebook and get on their keyboard. This guy's a ducker. I even heard that Golovkin likes to beat up smaller men, and they're like, oh, well, look at, Martirosyan and who was a substitute, Kell Brook. How many middleweights have fought welterweights? Carlos Monzon, Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins, name it. You name a guy. All of them. I mean, you don't think this has been going on since, since the inception of boxing? It's happened all the time. And again, it's not that welterweight always existed. That's not what I'm saying. But if you go through the list of middleweight champions, you see some small guys sprinkled in, right? I mean, Miguel Cotto was a welterweight titleist. He ended up beating Sergio Martinez, right? Again, Bernard Hopkins, Marvin Hagler, Carlos Monzon, et cetera, et cetera. They all fought welterweights. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, you say, oh, he fought Kell Brook, he fought Venus Martirosyan, he fought who else? Kasim Uma. I saw a guy reference Kasim Uma as if really that's a big deal. I mean, this was before Golovkin even, became a ranked fighter. But it's all ignoring context, right? Okay, well, let's ignore the Steve Rolls, who's a super middleweight. Let's ignore David Lemieux, who's obviously a very big middleweight. I mean, I think the dude went to the hospital last time he tried to make weight. Dominic Wade, who is bigger than him come fight night. Willie Monroe, who's a career middleweight. Curtis Stevens, who started off as a cruiserweight. Daniel Gill, Martin Murray, guys who have been super middleweights. What was his name? Usama. I can't even remember his name though. The African guy. He was as high as a light heavyweight. Marco Antonio Rubio was obviously a middleweight and ended his career at 168. Ashida, who ended his career as a fucking heavyweight. I mean, it's just ignoring context all the time to suit agendas. And I get it, man. I get it. We've all got our favorites. I understand. I do. But it's just nonsensical, and you sound like an illogical asshole when you're using all these odd arguments to try and support yourself. It's just, we've got to get to a more reasonable approach and a more reasonable discussion so we don't have to deal with all this fanboyism. And on that note, I'm going to get the hell out of here. That's my rant for tonight. If you disagreed, hey man, send me a message on Twitter, publicly call me out on Twitter, on Facebook. I don't care, man. If I said something wrong, I'm willing to engage with it. I'm willing to eat it. I'll eat crow if I have to. I don't, a lot of us don't like it, but I'm willing to do so if it's a learning experience. I mean, we all get shit wrong, all of us. We all we like to cut our losses. We don't like to acknowledge that stuff. I don't know how many knowledgeable guys I've seen talk to on shows, on Facebook, on Twitter, on, wherever, on forums who are like, yeah, this is the way it's going to be. I mean, look at the Anthony Joshua and Ruiz fight. Tons of people said that Ruiz didn't have a shot in hell. He's just a chubby guy who couldn't beat Parker, who Joshua beat handily. And look how many people had to eat crow because of it or didn't bother eating crow because of it. Some people are nicer in that they extend congratulatory remarks afterwards, and that's nice. But a lot of us don't say, hey, I thought this dude was going to whip this guy's ass, and I was completely wrong about it. We don't like to do that stuff. So I don't mind taking the losses. For me, the losses are a little more than a learning experience. Anyways, if you got suggestions for show topics, just want to chime in, it's all good. But, I'd like you guys to support us any way you can. Go to Facebook, give us a like, Twitter, a follow. We're pretty much on every social media. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. You can listen to us on, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, pretty much wherever you can find us. YouTube, go give us a like over there. And I appreciate it. And as always, we're brought to you by Bet Now, Seat Giant, and the Retired Boxers Foundation. So for the grueling truth, I'm your host, Jeremiah Preisser. Have a good night.